to miss something. But I just wanted to start with a few introductions. My name is Hannah Vanderveer. I'm the director of the Knoxville Chamber of Commerce. We also have Aaron Adams and Bill Menti. Do you guys want to hop on really quick and tell everyone your titles?
Hi, I'm Aaron Adams. I'm Knoxville City Manager.
I'm Bill Menti. I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator.
And then we also have Jason Van Osdal. Did I say your last name correctly?
You did, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I own Iowa Inspections and provide rental housing inspections for 4 different cities. And I'm talking to you today about doing rental property inspections in Knoxville at a later date.
So thank you to the 3 of you for joining us today. And thank you for everyone who was able to join in and learn. Basically, the goal for today is all informational. We want you to understand the program that is being proposed by to Knoxville City Council, and we want you to have a good frame of reference for the upcoming July 6th council meeting. As of right now, everyone except the speakers will be on mute. We have about 20 people on this call, so we're trying to keep the confusion down a little bit. If you do have a question that you would like to ask throughout this program, there is a chat function. If you type in a message, I will be looking at that and I will be able to ask the question for you. We'll also have some contact information at the end if you have more specific questions. So like I said, throughout this, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We are also recording it. It'll be sent to all of our participants and we'll have it on file so anyone is able to access this. But just a little bit of background about this program and why the Knoxville Chamber of Commerce wanted to host this meeting for our landlords. So the program was introduced to Knoxville City Council in 2019. Recently, with the pandemic happening and a little bit more downtime, they were able to put a lot of work towards that. And it was presented to council, an outline of the program was presented to council on June 15th. So the next step on how this would work is it will go to council again on July 6th to potentially be adopted into code. So right now, this is purely informational. We want you to understand what's going on here from a Knoxville Chamber of Commerce standpoint because this affects your business. If you have questions, you can ask them today. If you have comments, concerns, if you like the program, that should go to City Hall, City Council. So today is all about asking questions and understanding the program. Like I said, if you would like to ask a question, please put it in the chat box. Again, a little bit of housekeeping in order to minimize confusion. All microphones except for the speakers are on mute at this time. You can also send your questions at a later date to City Hall and we'll have that information for you at the end. In the chat box, I will link the memo that was in the last City Council agenda. That kind of is an overview of the program as well and a good reference point for you guys to look at. But we'll just get into some discussion points that we've put together. The city really wants you to be aware of what's going on, and Jason has some good insight of experiences he has. So let's start. The first question is really directed for Aaron and Bill. Why did the city feel the need to begin work on a program such as this?
Yeah, well, Hannah, thank you for allowing us to be here this morning. Thank you to all of you who are participating. We appreciate that. We feel like having you all informed is in everybody's best interest. So thank you for taking the time this morning. As to your question, as you mentioned, we first broached this subject back in 2019. This is something that the council had, different people on the council had talked to me about specifically. I think this really comes from a place wanting to ensure safety in our rentals here in town. And so we were asked by certain council people to consider a rental inspection program. Based on that, we did bring it to the full council back in 2019, just to gauge their interest. At that time, we were directed as a staff that it would be something that the council was interested in. We were asked to go ahead and proceed and start to put that together. And so, as you mentioned, it's taken us some time, but it brings us to where we are today, to where we do feel like we have a framework worked out, some proposed changes to the code that would allow us to start this program. So that's sort of where this all started, really from the council and some direction from them. And I think another consideration for the council and for us is that we know a lot of our peer communities here in Central Iowa do have programs like this one, and that they've had a lot of success in terms of improving the quality of the housing that's there, the safety of it, and the general aesthetic of their communities.
So that kind of leads right into the next question is, what other communities have you looked at and used as examples when creating your outline? Can you hear us, Aaron and Bill? Jason, are you still on?
I am.
Okay, I wanted to make sure it was not my internet. I guess you can, Jason, you work with Oskaloosa. Do you want to talk about their program a little bit while we're waiting for Aaron and Bill to?
Yeah, and I know from having meetings with Aaron and Bill that is their primary. They have been meeting quite often with Oskaloosa over the last few years, and have used a lot of their learning curve to go from the School of Hard Knocks that Oskaloosa has been through, and it's a long, hard path. So yeah, I know that Bill and Aaron have been talking closely with Sean and Mike Flav over in Oskaloosa. Also, Brian Dunkelberger and Aaron Chambers up in Newton have also been kind of instrumental in talking with the city about their program and getting it up to speed. Newton actually has taken a little bit different curve with theirs, because they came from a fire department based rental inspection program and have now transitioned over to Iowa Inspections, my company, to take on the actual inspection side of it, and then also transferred the administration portion over to the Public Works Department, which is where Brian is actually housed at. So yeah.
Okay. And I think we have Aaron and Bill back unfrozen.
Oh, good.
So the question for you two was, what other communities have you looked at? Jason kind of hopped in and talked about Oskaloosa a little bit and Newton. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, apologies. You gotta love technology. So we do seem to be having some starts and fits here with our connection at City Hall. But yeah, we definitely lean very heavily on Oskaloosa. Jason probably covered this, so I apologize if I'm being redundant here, but they went through the process actually just maybe 3 or so years ago. We prefer really not to reinvent the wheel. We've definitely reached out to Newton. We've looked at codes of communities all across Iowa. We've tried to look statewide, geographically. We've also tried to be consistent. You know, we understand we're not Ames, we are not Iowa City. And so those communities probably have different priorities and different systems and setups than what we would want. So we've tried to stick to researching the codes of similar communities. So really any community that's probably in the 5,000 to 15,000 population that has a program for rental inspection, we've probably looked at their code, if not contacted and spoken with them.
Sorry, I was muted. Bill, this next question is kind of more so for you, because I know your planning and zoning committee did some work on this. Can you kind of just explain what the Planning and Zoning Commission is and why they felt like this was a good program for Knoxville as well?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry. Can you explain, so this work was done a lot through the Planning and Zoning Commission as well, getting this outline done. Can you explain what the Planning and Zoning Commission is and why do they also feel like this program is necessary? Did you get that? Still no? Okay, you keep freezing. You're unfrozen right now. So,
I can hear you right now too.
okay, talk about your Planning and Zoning Commission because they help you put this outline together, correct?
Sort of. They're an advisory body to the city council. So when we do a code amendment such as this, we propose the amendment, and then we take it to planning commission for the recommendation to city council.
Okay.
So on June 9th, no, I'm sorry, this was in March. We took some of this to planning commission in March. Jason came to the meeting, was helpful to talk with the commission about the program, and then planning commission ended up unanimously voting to recommend approval of the amendment to council, and that's where we'll stand on Monday.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So the next thing I want you to talk about is how the process will work in terms of registering the properties and those inspections timelines. I know they're all listed out in the memo for that was presented to council, but can you verbalize those?
So, I think what's important for people to know, so let's just assume that Monday night the council goes ahead and they take the action and these amendments are approved and going forward. It just makes it easier if we work from that assumption. So let's all just work from that assumption moving forward. We would anticipate a long period, probably like 6 months or so, to onboard this process. We think that's beneficial from a staff standpoint to allow us to be prepared to have a sort of seamless integration of this program. We also think it's to the advantage of landlords. We plan to try and make as much of this information public as possible so that the landlords can know in advance what areas they may need to look into. Specifically, Jason will want to make clear, and he has offered to host landlord meetings after adoption of this code to lay out specifically, here's the things that I'll be inspecting. You can use those 6 or so months to get yourself back up to par. During that same time, we as a city staff will be working to identify all the rentals, and that's going to be quite a work. So the 6 months allows us to continue the work we've started there, identifying all of those, and then we will essentially you'll register with the city, and that starts the process. The expectation is an inspection will occur once every 3rd year, and we do plan to probably follow what Oskaloosa has done, which is those properties that pass clearly on a first inspection are given a 4th year. And so we don't want this to be something onerous where somebody is into your rental every day or every month. It's actually only going to occur once every 3rd year, and if you pass, it's almost like a free year for good behavior to give you that 4th year. And so at the highest level, that's sort of how the inspections will work.
Great. And you talked about the 3-year timeline, right? I was admitting somebody, so I think I missed it.
Yep, 3 years once you've passed inspection, and if you passed on the first pass, actually a 4th year.
Okay. Jason, we do have a question. Can you provide right now, just verbally, a basic like checklist that you go through when you're inspecting your properties in Oskaloosa?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that actually is key to what Aaron was talking about, is getting that checklist out to the property owners as soon as the council approves this and makes it out in public, so that the property owners have as much time in the warmer months to start preparing their properties to pass inspection, which is the absolute goal. So getting that information out there, having my information, text, phone, and email, even pictures are great too. I get them all the time, every week. Hey, Jason, I've got this stairway, I've got this deck, and then ask a few questions and get that back to them. I'm a communicator. I want for the property owners to always feel free to reach out, ask questions, and as Aaron had talked about, having these landlord meetings is also a very much important part of the first part of the process, to have the information in front of them, talk about the process, talk about how the inspections are going to look for those who haven't been through an inspection, and then talk about their specific property concerns face to face, and even looking at their pictures that they might have about an egress issue, a basement, so on and so forth, so that they can walk away from the meeting or conversation and having clear direction. That is the goal. So do we have a checklist? Absolutely. I'm willing to go through the checklist. I have it sitting right in front of me. Aaron, did you provide that information to the people in the meeting already? Is it part of the memo packet?
It's not, but we can definitely do that. It might still be Oskaloosa branded. We haven't put one together that has Knoxville logo, et cetera, but we can definitely send that to Hannah. And then Hannah, if you could distribute it after the meeting, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, why don't you do that, and I can send it to everyone who has registered. I'm also linking the memo again because there were specific things in that memo that would be looked at. Jason, I don't know how extensive your list is. Can you touch on some overarching things?
Yes, absolutely. If I start droning on, or if you want to reel me back in, go right ahead. But essentially, when a person calls, so they would get the notification from the city, and that is typically a paper packet of information, including the ordinance, the checklist, and the registration form. With that, they would make their modifications to their property or properties, and then they feel that they are ready for inspections. They would call me, email me, some text, but usually that's the way it goes. Most are calls, 90%. With that, I would converse with them and go through what I would call the spiel, the highlighted things that are often missed, talking through smoke detector placement, carbon monoxide detector placement, ground fault circuit interrupter outlet placement, fire extinguisher being placed in the house, so on and so forth. That way that they can kind of go through that in their mind. Maybe they forgot about it, or maybe they had a question about any of those topics and want to visit about that while they're trying to schedule their inspection. Oftentimes they discover that there is a problem with missing items that need to be taken care of, and then they can push that inspection back as we put it in the Google Calendar, which is available to all the city staff as necessary to always be able to view that in real time. As I put that in the calendar, the person that's in charge of that in the city would actually be able to look at that and see that Mr. Johnson scheduled his inspection. This is the address, this is his contact information, and they know that it's taken care of, and they can cross that off of their list or actually make note of it in their queue, was what the city of Oskaloosa would call it. So Hannah, did you want me to go into a few of the items about smoke detectors and things that are on the checklist? Is that what you want me to do?
Yeah, I think people are kind of curious what that checklist would look like. So if you kind of have an overarching idea, and then we'll be sure to email the detailed list out to everyone afterwards.
Absolutely. And this checklist is something that the city is able to, it's an ordinance. They have complete control over it. It is based off of the International Property Maintenance and Housing Code. And with that, it would primarily be very, very, very close to what Oskaloosa has, Newton, Colfax, and Mitchellville. And a lot of that is just mirrored straight out of the code, the minimum housing requirements. An inspection starts to happen at the curb line. And with that, we are looking for clearly visible house numbers, not just for me, but also for the emergency crews and the fire department when they would have to show up. It's part of the building code. So making sure that the house numbers are up and clearly visible is the first part. Making sure that the property is maintained, meaning the vegetation growth, the paint or siding on the house, the windows are in good condition. Debris in the front, side, and rear yards has been picked up and cleaned up and stored inside. If you have a shed in the back and it's full of debris, that's totally fine. It cannot be sitting out in the yard. Also making sure that the roof is in good condition. We're not looking for new roof, new windows, new siding. We're looking for maintained items is what we're looking for. And with that, some of the people that are in the call right now is, how picky are you when it comes to this? I'm a small town building inspector of 20 communities. Picky is not something that I deal with. I deal with minimum housing code. And so we are not looking for that. We are looking for maintained properties. So basically, if it needs to be pressure washed, scraped and painted, please do that. If you need to have a truckload of items taken out of the rear yard, please do that. It's our job to call that out. And if you have a question about it, please give me a call or shoot me a picture, and we would definitely visit about that process. The accessory buildings are also part of this. So if you've got a garage and or a shed or some kind of a structure in the rear yard, it also needs to be maintained. Foundations in older homes is typically what we go to. We are not looking for a new foundation. We are looking for structural deterioration and failure. If a home has a failed foundation and we walk into it, we will call that out. Cracks, shifting walls is not something that we would call out. That is in 90% of the homes that I go into, and the inspection process wouldn't go far with that. So we're looking for failures. If you have a question or a failed foundation, please consult with a professional to have them take a look at that, so there's not a serious tragedy. Stairways are oftentimes discussed. 4 risers or more require a handrail. A deck or walking surface that's 30 inches or more requires a guard. And a guard would be any kind of a process or system put in place. Typically, you're seeing 2x2s placed so that a 4-inch sphere, the size of a child's head, can't pass between. And that is always the intention of this minimum building code, is for small children and even everyone else in the home not to get hurt. So if you've got a deck that's 6 foot off the ground and it doesn't have any kind of a guard, and we see that often, it will need a guardrail. If that deck hasn't been replaced in 30 years and is in decayed shape and imminent failure, it will need to be replaced. And that is something that you would want to take seriously, because that would be causing someone to get hurt. Smoke detector placement is a very, very common question. Smoke detectors need to be placed in every bedroom by manufacturer specification, preferably on the ceiling because smoke rises, or within 1 foot of that ceiling. And then outside that bedroom, a smoke and or carbon monoxide detector or combo detector needs to be placed. If you've got 3 bedrooms, that means that you're going to have 1 right there outside those bedrooms. So if you got 3 bedrooms, you'd have 1, 2, 3 smoke detectors, and then 1 smoke/carbon monoxide detector in the hallway. That one covers the floor. And then if there's a basement, a smoke and carbon monoxide detector in the basement. If there's an upper level, that would need to be up there as well. And if there's a bedroom upstairs, inside that bedroom would need to be a smoke detector. A fire extinguisher. Most cities are very happy that a fire extinguisher is on site. 210 ABC would be a common size for that. And we as a company are happy that a fire extinguisher is on site, and placement is always asked by the tenant or landlord, where is the fire extinguisher? As long as they know where it's at, mounting of that doesn't really concern me. As long as they can get to it in a rapid fashion, that's all that really matters to me. So there is no requirement for that like there would be for a commercial building.
Quick question about smoke detectors. Do you require them to be hardwired?
No.
No. Okay.
No, they don't need to be hardwired, just as long as they're operational. If you're a property owner that has multiple properties, coming with your bag of goodies, 9-volt batteries, a couple of smoke detectors, screwdrivers, things that need to be tightened up and maintained. As long as it happens on site, I put up more than my share of smoke detectors, helping out people that need help doing them. And my son that does the inspections with me, Harrison, he will do the same as well. So if you need a hand putting something up or getting something maintained, we'll always be there for you to help you out. And a lot of the folks that are on this call and that will be a part of this also have properties in Oskaloosa, Newton, Colfax, and Mitchellville, or know landlords that have properties there, please reach out and visit with them. If you haven't been through the process, visit with those property owners. We are an open book, and they will tell you the gospel truth about how we operate our business. And we have a good communication line with all of our clients and landlords. So.
And then this is a two-part question. So what is your experience with inspecting public housing units? Do you have any?
Oh, yes. The first thing I would want to say to that is, Aaron had alluded to being onerous. These constant inspections for a HUD housing or public housing is something that is hard on tenants. We respect that. And if the landlords have these types of properties and want to do these inspections at the same time or on the same day, we do that very often. That way they're less intrusive to be there. Their list is similar to our list. The way they enforce is different than the way we enforce. We are enforcing a city ordinance, and they are they're into different aspects of that. So we don't actually commingle with what they're looking at from what we are looking at. Ours is safety and ordinance enforcement is what we're into.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This next question gets more into the cost of things. So Aaron and Bill, this is probably for you. Can you talk about the cost that landlords would see associated with this program?
Yeah, sorry, we're still having a little bit of internet issues, but you were asking about costs, Hannah?
Yep. I see them smiling, but I don't know if they can hear me.
Okay, so I'll take a stab at it and let me know if I got what you're actually looking for. So our expectation is, as a city, we'll have a $15 registration fee that is paid annually, and you can actually pay it years in advance so that you can sync up. So if Jason is coming to inspect every third or maybe even fourth year, you have an option to actually do your registration through those 3 or even 4 years. Again, $15 annually. That goes to the city. We do have considerable administration as part of this. Then the actual inspections, you'll work directly with Jason. So I'm not even going to take a chance at saying the wrong pricing, but Jason, why don't you go ahead and I'll let you speak for yourself. We think we know what you're going to charge.
Yes, I can. And our pricing is very simple. It's the same for every community that we have. It's $75 for the first unit in the same building, and then $25 for each additional unit in that building. If you have a duplex, it would be $100. If you have a triplex, it'd be $125. So if you have 2 homes across the street from each other, $75.
And just
and that is paid on site, cash, credit card, or a check.
And just a reminder to make sure I'm understanding this right. You'll only get inspected once every 3 years, unless you fail. And then you get a 4th extra year. I think that's the way I'm understanding it. So those will be not like an every year cost for people. I'm going to try to type Aaron's questions in there because I think he'll be able to hear me better. But I want him, can you touch on the city's budget a little bit, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. In terms of a complete city budget, this will be a very small piece. Again, we are not running this to try and make money for the city. Our primary goal, which Jason has touched on, is safety. That is absolutely our primary goal. We know there are studies, study after study, that even just basic items like a carbon monoxide smoke detector save lives for people. We know this through the numbers. So that's our primary concern. As a city, honestly, we would be happy if we broke even at the $15 charge. We want it to be as low as possible so it's not cost prohibitive. and keeping this as reasonable as possible for landlords. We do need to cost recover a little bit, but this in no way is going to help subsidize budget for anything else in the community. It's just trying to help keep our community safe at its essence. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're looking for, but from a city budget standpoint, we're really trying to make this a quote unquote break even proposition for ourselves. And what we find is, assuming you have an inspection every 3rd year and you don't qualify for the 4th year, you have to be re-inspected. Assuming your unit is standalone, so you're paying $75 per unit, and you're paying the $15 annually to us as a city, what we find is a per unit per month charge of about $3.33. So at the end of the day, we're not trying to break the bank. We're not trying to make this a huge financial burden for anybody. Again, it's about trying to keep people safe. And so we try to keep those fees as low as possible.
Thank you. Jason, this question is more for you. You touched on it a little bit about inspecting public housing units, about how your list is comparable maybe to their inspection. Can you go into detail any more about that, or somebody's just wondering more about clarification?
Yeah, I mean, their list is exactly that. That is their list. Our list comes essentially straight from the city ordinance that the council passes. And that list would be available. I actually don't have privy to what their list looks like compared to our list. I honestly, I really couldn't even speak to what they had to say about it. But I touched on a few things that are on the typical checklist that we utilize, and then actually make note and hand that to the property owner before we leave the property, so they can see the actual checklist. They can see the items that were deficient, and if they pass the inspection, they will also have that as well. So as far as the what the a HUD housing checklist would have in relationship to a city's checklist, I really couldn't speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Aaron, I sent you the message via the chat, but I'll also read it out loud. So if this process goes into place, what is the timeline for current landlords to get approval, or will they be grandfathered in for this program? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, there's no grandfathering. So if you own a rental property, it's our expectation that you will be inspected. Time frame, I kind of touched on this earlier. We anticipate probably something in the neighborhood of a 6-month lead-in for this. So maybe I would be thinking in terms of like 1st of the calendar year kind of a time frame. There might be some flexibility. I've had discussions with 1 or 2 of the council people about that time frame, so we might want to err on the side of caution, and maybe instead of January 1 it becomes February 1 or March 1, something like that. But if I were a landlord, I would be thinking about January 1 as my goal to have my properties in compliance. Sorry, was there another part to that? Did I cover that?
Just asking about grandfathered in. That's not the case.
Yeah. So no grandfathering in. And so again, we want this to be as seamless and smooth for landlords as possible. So if somebody came to us, so if it passes on July 6th and you are approaching us at City Hall before the month of July even ends, perfect. We're going to start working with you to get you registered. But it's not our expectation that everyone will do that the day that this thing passes. So we'll be using those 6 or 7 months to get everybody registered. Again, we as a city, we still have some legwork to do as far as identifying all those properties. And so we'll be reaching out to, and then we'll try and get everybody registered. And we anticipate inspections probably get going again, start of the year, new year.
Okay, thank you. Somebody's asking a clarifying question about the $60 fee that's mentioned in the memo. So the $60 per building registration, a one-time cost, question mark.
So the city, we're planning to just do $15 per unit per year. And so you know, again, we're all talking in hypotheticals. The council may feel differently, but our expectation is $15 per unit per year.
Okay. Let's see here. I have one more question for Jason, and then we're going to move on to a different topic here. So if this inspection is a lower level inspection compared to an HQS inspection, will those properties be exempt?
No, if it's a rental property, it would be inspected. I don't know that I would be classifying it, any inspection as a lower level or higher level. It would just be a different inspection for different needs that that landlord is enrolled in. We would just be enforcing the city code.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Aaron, do you have any insight to that question? They specified that question was more so for you.
At this point, we don't have any plan to have any properties exempted. Our expectation is that if this passes, any property that is a rental property will be inspected. You know, obviously council has the purview to do what they feel is best, and we'll follow that. But our expectation is if it's a rental, it's inspected.
Okay, and that goes right into the next point that I wanted you to talk about is, can you explain what is considered a rental property that would go into this program? We had a question on, is this a voluntary program? From my understanding, every residential rental would be in this program, correct?
That is correct. Every residential rental property will be inspected. This is not voluntary. This is mandatory. You know, I guess that's the simplest way to say it. As far as what is considered a rental, basically, if you live in it and do not own it or have a contract to purchase it, that is considered a rental. I mean, I might be oversimplifying this. Jason, you can jump in too. I know you've dealt with this in some of your other communities, and there can be some, I guess, nuance to this aspect, but our interpretation is if you are a residential rental property, you will be inspected.
That is correct. If it's not owner occupied or have a county recorded contract on file, then it would be considered a rental property and be eligible for inspection.
And just a couple more clarifying things. This only covers residential, not commercial. So if you have a commercial building and you have a business in it, that will not be inspected, correct, Aaron and Bill?
That's correct. This will not extend into commercial. Honestly, I'd have to look this up, but I don't think the Iowa code allows for us to do commercial inspections. Jason, I don't know if you know that one off the top of your head. I'm putting you on the spot, but
No.
I don't think Iowa code provides for us to do commercial inspection.
I don't know if I'm inferring more into it, but if they were referring to an apartment building as a commercial building, that would be eligible for inspection. As for a downtown business or a freestanding business, no. Now, the city of Newton does do commercial business inspections, and my company actually is taking that over January 1st from the fire department, but that's not what we're talking about today. That would also be a specific city ordinance that the council would want to pass if they wanted to go down that road in the future.
Thank you. Aaron, this probably goes more for you. What if it's a property you don't pay taxes on? Still falls in line with the program?
Correct. You know, I myself have been a renter. I didn't pay property taxes. I mean, at least not directly. Most likely my rent went towards those, but regardless of property tax status, there's an expectation that if it is a rental property, it will be inspected.
Thank you. The last point that I really wanted to ask you, so if any of the participants have any additional questions, now is the time to put them in the chat box, but can you talk about the appeal process? I know there have been questions at the last council meeting about you know, issues with tenants or tenants being able to file a complaint. Can you touch on that, please?
So maybe I'll start first with the appeal process, and then I can, or maybe even Jason could jump in as far as when a tenant makes a complaint. But let me start first with the appeal process. that is part of what the city's going to need to work through over that 6-month period. When we look at the Oskaloosa example, they do have a separate board of appeals that handles those. We do not currently have a comparable board here in Knoxville. And quite frankly, for folks who are listening to this, we really struggle with our volunteer boards. We are finding we have vacancies all the time. And so we do want to have an appeal process. We will have an appeal process. We don't know who specifically will be part of that appeal process. We are working through some of those options, but there will be an appeal process. We just don't know what group it will be. What we definitely don't want to do is put it back to city staff or Jason. We want it to be somebody outside of the process who can have that to make it a fair appeal. So we're working on that. Obviously the biggest challenge being finding people who want to volunteer for a board like that. So we'll continue to work on that. And then as far as, it kind of felt like it was a two-parter where we were talking about tenants and tenants potentially raising complaints. The way we would intend to handle that would be if a tenant brings forward a complaint, if it's found to be frivolous or there's nothing to the complaint, that the bill actually goes to the tenant. If there is an issue, then the landlord then needs to pay the inspection fee and to address the issue. But to try and tamp down a frivolous complaint, that this can swing both ways, that if the tenant makes the complaint and there's no validity to it, that they actually may end up with the bill. Jason, I don't know, is that consistent with what you're doing in Oskaloosa? That's my understanding there.
It is, and honestly, I can alleviate a little bit of this. It's nearly a non-topic discussion point. Not that it's not important, because it is important to have an appeals process, but it is something that very, very rarely comes up. And that board can hold two hats. It can be your building code board of appeals, as is called out in your already adopted building codes. Oftentimes the Board of Adjustment does that, but it can be a separate board. That board could also be your rental code board of appeals as well. So as they convened, that chairman would let them know what board they're actually acting as. And you're right. The person that at the city that would field these phone calls from either a landlord or a tenant, they would dig in a little bit about what the topic is. They would want to know that that tenant, let's just say a tenant is making a claim about mold. We've got a mold under the sink in the bathroom. That person at the city is going to say, well, have you talked to your landlord about it? No, because he doesn't want to do anything. He never fixes anything, so no. Well, that doesn't necessarily create something that the city is going to act on right away. They need to show in writing that they have tried to communicate with that property owner, and that property owner was either negligent or refusing to fix the issue before the city would ever step in and require an inspection out of that. So we would want the tenant and landlord to resolve their own problems, and then if they cannot resolve their problems, bring that to the city, and we will investigate it further and possibly do an inspection if necessary.
Thank you.
How often does that happen? I haven't done one in 5 years.
This is a clarifying question. So commercial buildings with upper level apartments are included in this program.
That is correct. That is correct. Yes. Oskaloosa has written into their city ordinance that those upper level on the downtown square area have to have a bona fide secondary form of egress direct from each bedroom down to ground level. That is a topic that the city will have to consider. Some cities don't have a special provision in their code for that. The residential code, the IRC, is very clear about if you have a two-story home in town or any town, and you open up your bedroom egress window and jump out, that is totally fine. When you go to 3 stories or more, that kicks you into the International Building Code, and a secondary form of egress down to ground level will be provided. But if the city council decides that they want to adopt the Oskaloosa code for their downtown businesses, that is something that we will talk about at the meetings.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Erin, this question is more so for you. Talking about local, state, or federal governments. Okay, sorry. Low Rent Housing Agency of Knoxville has properties. Are they exempt from this program? I think they commented back and said they are being told they're not exempt. Do you have any clarifications or details on that?
Just repeating what we said earlier, it's our expectation that all units that are residential rental units will be inspected.
Okay, thank you. And then this question, I might be able to answer it too, but somebody asked if the city has a list of resources that can help with repairs. I know in conversations, Erin, that we have had about past programs is, the city is aware of private businesses, but they're not the organization to be giving referrals, if that makes sense. So from a Chamber of Commerce standpoint, we're happy to try to get a list together of resources that can help with repairs. We're kind of the business organization of the community. So we're more than happy to let people know who we have as members and who can do certain work. So hopefully that answers your question, and we can start to make a list on that. Those are all the questions I'm seeing from the chat. Someone did have a question about City Council on July 6th, but we'll close up with that information. So for Erin and Bill, what's the next step for people if they want to make their thoughts known to council for July 6th? How will that meeting look? Where can they show up? Where can they send their thoughts and opinions on things?
Yeah, so we're happy to take comments. Those do go into the public record, so those can be either emails or phone calls to us at City Hall. We will share all of those with our City Council in anticipation of that July 6th meeting. And again, those do go into the record. The meeting itself is being held via Zoom. Again, with the current pandemic, we are still in a Zoom environment. Unfortunately, we do have the option for people to physically come to City Hall. We will have a Zoom setup there that night that they would be able to participate in. But we do encourage people to reach out ahead of time if possible, via email or phone call to us here at City Hall. And then, to participate via Zoom by coming up here to City Hall that day of.
And when we get that checklist that we'll email out, we can email that information as well. That meeting begins at 6:15.
Correct.
Okay. So July 6th at 6:15. Those were all the points that we had to cover. I think we've covered everything in the chat box, but if people have questions, like you said, they can direct them to City Hall at this point in time. Anything else, Jason or Erin, you guys want to add?
I don't think so. I definitely appreciate everybody's time and thought this morning. We will be having landlord meetings, so if you do have some thoughts about your properties or the topic in general, please bring those to those future landlord meetings. That will be publicized by the city at a later date, assuming that the council votes on this soon. And I appreciate everybody's time today.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in and taking the time to be informed. I will follow up with all of you who are participating with the recording, the Oskaloosa checklist, and the information for the July 6th City Council meeting. Everyone have a really great rest of your week and a safe holiday weekend. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.